Who fell? Who fell and ruined our broadcast? Oh, it was you. It was Vinny. Vinny, you jerk. You're not getting your bike.
Hello, Tom.
Hey, Dana, what's going on?
Not much. Just happy to be alive.
You are joed up today.
I am. I'm all joed up, and I've got Joes to show.
Oh, that's even better. You got more Joes. I guess
More Joes.
we can get right into it on another episode of Two Guys Talking Toys. I guess
Yes.
I'll hit it at the top. Thank you to all our listeners and subscribers. Thank you for watching. If you like the show, give us a like. If you like it even more, subscribe. Tell your friends. Tell your buddies. Tell them all.
Wow, we've changed up the formula. This is great.
Gotta switch it up.
Yeah, keep
It's
them on
what
their
G-
toes. Keep them on their toes.
it's what GI Joe would want.
Yes, and it's what they know, because knowing is half the battle.
Is half the battle. Don't disappoint barbecue.
Yeah, I got more Joes. You know me. I can never have enough Joes. So
Fantastic. What'd you get?
let's see. I got some of them that aren't opened yet, but I do have an open one to show. I got the new Storm Shadow.
Oh, nice. I heard that these were popping up in like Barnes and Noble. Did you get yours from the bookstore or did yours
I,
come in the mail?
I do frequent Barnes and Noble, but that's not where I got them. I got them from Big Bad Toy Store. And one of the coolest characters when I was a kid, but I haven't opened them yet, Mr. Alpine.
That is awesome. I remember us having like a quick discussion about Alpine on one of the like first or second episodes of this,
Yeah,
where you talked
yeah,
about his grappling hook weapon.
yeah. And it's right there. They didn't let us down.
And
I always liked Alpine. I don't even know why. He had cool color scheme, but he still looked cool. Like he had that open, like even now, even though it's a very fashionable look. Like if
yeah,
you took all the gear off him, that's like a cool outfit. I always liked Alpine. I don't know why. And I
he's
got
great. I feel like he'd be good in multiple situations. You got a guy like Snow Job who's good in one spot, but Alpine, even though he's got a specialty, if he
yeah,
was down in like the mines with what's his name, Tunnel Rat,
Tunnel
he'd
Rat.
probably still be just as helpful.
Right. Because going up, going down, spelunking, climbing, whatever you needed. It was like, oh, we need to break into the Cobra headquarters. They have a big wall. Good thing we have Alpine.
You're gonna need a grappling hook.
And I got the Iron Grenadier bats.
Oh, that looks awesome. I
Yeah.
saw regular Grenadier went into stock, I think, in on Walmart for 15 minutes, and then it was gone.
Um, you know, a bats is a bats at this point. Like when we were kids, there were two. There were, and now we've got a million bats. So
I'll take them. It's real hard to not massively troop build every bat that comes out because I that's what I do, and they're Cobras. So like I've narrowed my scope down to just getting Cobra guys.
right. I'm excited that the Iron Grenadiers are starting to show up because when we were kids, like when the Grenadiers came out, they because my younger brother Dale and I kind of, like I said, we had a weird division of characters that we would
Mhm.
when we played GI Joe, right? So he had Hawk and all the main Joes. I had Duke and like the Tiger Force, and then I had Cobra Commander and the twins and the Dreadnoks, and then
Mhm.
he had Destro and Major Blood and the Iron Grenadiers and Baroness. So when the Grenadiers start coming out, when I heard they were coming, I was excited because I felt that for Dale. Like finally the classifieds caught up to what he likes. I can't wait for the
Yeah,
Grenadiers Destro to come out. But I did pick up the Iron Grenadier.
that is fantastic.
These figures look so good. And I want to make a statement and then I'm going to explain myself. So don't jump on me when I make the initial statement. I love when the villains have this Nazi aesthetic. And I'm not saying that because I
Oh,
sympathize with the
he just
Nazis.
he just opened the floodgates for
I
getting
know.
all the DMs.
I like it because in our lifetime, right, there is nothing more villainous than a Nazi. Like they're just the perfect bad guys. They represent greed and hate and violence. And like there's no better bad guy than a Nazi. And when Destro, like Cobra Commander's guys, like Cobra Commander had that very military type. He's on my desk. Cobra Commander had that very military type uniform to himself,
Mhm.
but the Cobra troops were more utilitarian, right? They had the, the boots and the belts, but they didn't look Nazi. And for
Mhm.
Destro to splinter off and go full Nazi wear like this, even to include the sword,
Yeah.
which they kept it gold, like the
Mhm.
original. I don't know if you can see it or not.
Oh,
But
that is really nice.
but this, like you stand this figure next to um the Red Skull
Mhm.
or the bad guys from Hellboy
Yeah.
or any of the, like this looks like one of the Red Skull's guys. And I
Yeah.
love the trim. It just looks so sharp. And I never realized how much Kylo
Huh.
Ren looks
Oh,
like one of
yeah,
the Iron Grenadiers.
that is very true. You could fill out your ranks with some Kylo Rens and have him be slightly less whiny under Destro's command.
Oh, the Skywalker men are just Princess Leia was
Just
the
whiny babies.
she was the most manly of the Skywalkers.
Darth Leia should have been a thing. Just say
Absolutely. But this figure is phenomenal. The sculpt is great. The weapons are great.
that
The
doesn't.
paint job, even down to the belt buckle with the
Yeah.
skull on it. This is one of the better troop figures to come out in classifieds. And my
Mhm.
message to Dale, because I know you're going to be watching, is that I have one for you.
He's waiting in your pile of loot, Dale.
Yeah, no fret. I got it.
That is.
This is an amazing figure. The boots, the whole look.
Mhm.
Like the original ones were cool. Don't get
Yeah.
me wrong. But this is just so well done. So
That
well done.
they do. They look fantastic, and you're 100% right. Once you, it was such an easy standard thing. Once you get into a Nazi look or that kind of design, that's your bad guy. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of miss when there was no question about that
Right.
because Nazis are bad. Just saying.
Right. Yeah. World who is listening to me, Nazis are bad guys. But the sword going on there, the rapier, perfect.
But
I,
he
I do
does
want
look.
to I do want to share a funny story with you while I have a moment. I was cleaning turtles and doing my normal Saturday routine, and I figured, oh my God, we're going to be recording. I better go get something to eat. And I went to McDonald's, and I'm sitting there eating, and I hear there's like a nice family in the corner. Place is basically empty. I'm sitting there as the family in the corner, and I hear this laughter. I'm like, I know that laughter. Who is that? But I can't see the person behind the column and whatnot. And then I'm listening to the laughter, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, it isn't a person I know. The laughter was spot on. Salacious Crumb, that little guy,
Really?
like spot on. So much so that while sitting there, I pulled up a video and played it. And I was like, it was spot on match. It was freaky. But
Did you?
that woman's laugh was Salacious Crumb. No doubt about it. She did the voice of Salacious Crumb. I guarantee it.
It's always amazing when you stumble across something like that. There was a person that I knew a few years ago, and I was working on something, and then I hear almost pitch perfect uh Jared Leto's laughter from the Joker, like his Joker laugh, that weird, very specific,
Right.
weird,
That
like
slow.
staccato kind of broken. And I heard this, and I thought it was somebody doing that because Suicide Squad had just come out,
Yeah.
which tells you how long ago this was. But I look up, and it's this guy, and I turned to my buddy, and I was like, "What's happening? Is this on purpose?" Because the person who was doing it was not someone who I imagine would have ever gone to see Suicide Squad, may not have known
Right.
who Jared Leto was, but it was unnerving, just like it.
I know exactly what laugh you're talking about too.
I guess it had to come from somewhere. So there are people out there that do that, but man, that was just like the whole like you couldn't believe it when you heard it. I could not
It
believe.
was spot on. It was spot on. I was like, I got to get out of here before I'm frozen in carbonite. What did you get?
Well, I'll tell you what I didn't get. Two Bob Steady from
Frontal lobotomy?
from the well, that may come later. I've been trying to get my pre-order for Two Bop City from Target. It activated. They shipped it out. It made it out to my neck of the woods, my local, according to the FedEx tracker, it made it out to my local post office, where it then hit a quote unquote shipping exception, and the excuse written in the slot was inclement weather. It's been 50 degrees here.
Yeah, it's a little breezy. It's a little breezy. You never know. It's a little breezy.
So I'm not quite sure what inclement weather means in this area. Just say you lost my package. So now I'm mad because Two Bob Steady, who I've been waiting for, which from what I've been reading has been just hitting the shelves everywhere except here in Targets. So people have been getting theirs before people have pre-ordered theirs. It finally goes out, and now it's somewhere out.
Well, it's windy.
There.
It blew away. Are you going to sing the Feifel song somewhere out there?
It is, because I'm just as annoyed at FedEx as I am at Feifel the Mouse. I cannot stand Feifel.
Why?
Maybe I need to rewatch it, but I don't think I ever will, because I hated that movie. So,
now,
you
hated it because they said there were no cats in America.
Yeah, and I was like, "What? That's nonsense. Why would you ever want to go to a place like that?" But
correct.
So to try and rectify this situation, because I'm impatient and I want to buy steady, I tried to order from not one but two different Targets that claim to have it in stock in this area. Both of them canceled my order. They said,
"Wow,
not a one." None.
Well, the weather's so bad.
So Two Bob Steady's not happening. But what I do. Here's why I really, really wanted to get him in hand. Aside from it being a cool combination, aside from it being a cool character, I really want to see, because I went off the rails with this, and I've been sending you pictures over since like this line has appeared of my own ideas for Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. I've blocked you.
I send them through. I don't get any response. And I was like, you don't like Extendicator? You're not a fan of Fisto Jones? I don't understand. I thought these were gold. Guess not. But what I want to do is see if the heads from Bebop and Rocksteady will pop onto any of the Origins figures.
Oh, because that would be cool.
Yeah, because I want to take Rocksteady's head, see if it'll fit on Ram Man to get Ram Steady, and I want to see if I can fit Bebop's head onto Triclops to get Tribop. And I think that would be fun. They're all designed.
Is that different from an Mbop?
Yeah, different from Mbop. That's too higher pitched. Or it might just be a different one of his eye settings. His name may change depending on the eye. But all right, so I don't have anything that I personally purchased recently this week. However, the ever increasing pile of stuff is still ever increasing. So today's package comes from Hasbro Pulse. Ooh, what do I get?
It's Nemesis Enforcer.
Yeah, that's kind of funny, because I would have sworn that last week that's what was going to be in there, and it wasn't. So
I got all three of mine really quickly.
This is the fun / I guess maybe problem with ordering the things that I do and then forgetting about it and then them sitting there.
I love fun / maybe problems.
So this is not Nemesis Enforcer. This is in fact
Scar,
who, for the record, anyone that just watches Disney Plus Marvel stuff is not a stupid angsty teen that shows up at a barbecue.
Wow.
Spoilers, She-Hulk, but you should have watched it already. Or rather, just don't watch that last 15 minutes of the final episode. Rest of it's great. But anyway, yay, Scar.
I like how they sculpted his hair, like in front of his face.
Yeah,
got a very like kind of Glenn Danzig thing going on, but I like it.
I should probably take some of it back. Scar is kind of an angsty. I mean, he's an angsty baby that grew up on a planet that his father destroyed. So I mean, he's got some definite angst going on. But this is a fantastic update, because I remember him being in, I think it was the Toy Biz line, wasn't it? That had Scar in it. There is another Scar figure.
Yeah, there was, and also the Agents of Smash toy line did him as well, which I like that toy line. It was pretty good. Cartoon was horrible, but the toys were cool.
Oh, you didn't like the cartoon? I enjoyed the cartoon.
It was a little too slapstick for me, but I did like the animation and the character development.
Yeah, I like that it just wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. And like once you got into it, you're like, okay, well, this is what I'm in for, and they don't disappoint. And they did fun things like making She-Hulk a Herald of Galactus, and they turned. I don't remember if they did it to Ego or if they were fighting Ego, but they transferred Hulk's consciousness into a planet, and then the title card said Planet Hulk, which was
teased. Yeah,
hilarious.
I'm always fighting my ego.
But yeah, so Scar is pretty neat. And it's kind of hard to see on the box, but he comes with his sword, which is awesome. Because I don't know if the original one came with that.
Yeah, that's a great figure. I love that how they sculpted the hair.
You know what I would love for them to finally do?
Barbizon beautiful.
I want them to make, like, this is great, and I'm glad that we have Scar. Now, can we please get Kyra? Can we get the Hulk's wife? I want Kyra, and I want his other son, because Hulk has multiple children, but two of the more important ones are Scar, and the other one that looks more like his mother, I think his name was Hirokala? I believe it's something along those lines, but he looks more like the mother and had this really good storyline. He's completely evil. He's a monster. No pun intended, but we need toys of these. We're still missing Korg, for crying out loud. So
not a non-movie version of him.
Yes.
Can we see the box art on the back? I saw a flash of it.
Yes, it's very Conan, which is nice.
Yeah, it is. It's
almost,
like
almost very Frank Rosetta.
Yeah, that's why you kept flashing it. I was like, wow, I want to see that artwork. It looks good.
Yeah, they did a really good job with this. I like this, and
that's the same stance you took when they told you they no longer had cheese curds at the ale house. You did that.
I do it every week. Every week, they'll never bring them back. I don't understand why. Look, if they want me to stop doing this, they'll bring them back, and then I will stop making a spectacle of myself. So, box number 2. I'm doing 2 a week because the pile just keeps growing, and I really need to eventually open all of these things. This one is coming from shipping with lots of zeros. That's interesting.
It's coming from Dimension X.
Coming from sent to me by Slash. There's
I like that you snip with the scissors. Like when you're opening a box with scissors, you snip. I usually just and rip, like stab and rip. Very Voorhees style.
Actually, it depends on, like, if I'm doing it lengthwise like this, then it's more worth my while to.
Away from yourself, safety,
I know,
man.
You'd think the number of times I've slashed myself open with an X-Acto blade that I would have learned that by now, but nah. Oh, hey, all right. So this is. It was
awesome McFarlane box.
It was a mystery.
Finally, you have him.
Super duper cheap Necron that I got on that eBay.
It's been like 6 episodes since we did the Green Lantern thing, and you talked about how much you needed that Necron, but kept not buying it. So I'm glad that you have it.
Yeah, I finally got him. He finally hit the point where I was like the discount on this is absurd. This was like a single-digit purchase, so nice. Very worth it. He is fantastic, and
where did you find him?
I wanted him.
Where did you find him besides the shipping department of somewhere?
This was that same eBay seller. That's like the
gotcha. Yeah.
Department for Target, and they'd had, it seems to be over, but for a few weeks in a row, they were doing this kind of amazing sale where their stuff was already a discounted price, and then there was another 50% discount on top of that. So this was already sitting at a pretty low price, and I just didn't, because I can't fall down this rabbit hole again in a 7-inch scale. But Necron's kind of an exception because he's supposed to, he's
can't or won't.
Huh?
Can't or won't.
I can't do it. I should not do it. So I'm behaving myself as best as I possibly can. But Necron is an exception because he's one of those like conceptual characters that can change his size and kind of be whatever you need him to be. So this will actually fit in if/when I'm ever able to display my Green Lantern collection with all the Black Lanterns. This fits in perfectly, like looming behind them as a
it's a great figure.
menace. So yeah, this is great. He looks awesome. So good job on McFarlane for making this, and good job on including the side, because that was a big point of contention. But yeah, so this is definitely what I wanted. He's great. The articulation is great. The sculpt is great. And speaking of articulation. Dana, I want to talk about articulation today because it always comes up in. I didn't realize that we never did a full episode just focusing on this. We talked
Right,
about it a lot.
because you and I aren't going to agree on it.
Yeah, we bring it up a lot with like
Yeah.
stuff that we've collected, and we are different. We our collecting preferences are different enough where the things that you prefer to collect generally have a different articulation scheme to the stuff that I prefer to collect. So I feel like now is the perfect time, and it's such a staple in the industry. It's almost one of the first questions people ask, aside from who is it.
Right.
Questions: is it articulated? What's the articulation on?
Right. Are the joints frozen? How do you get it out?
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. So let's discuss. Let's start with, I guess, the first figure that you got that had articulation.
Okay, let me think. So when we were young, obviously 5 points was the thing, right? Star Wars figures had the 5 points of articulation. But at the time, there were other figures that had more articulation, but they weren't made as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think my prejudice towards less articulation came from that. And I'm talking about like, so Star Wars came out, and then Buck Rogers had elbow joints and knee joints
Mm-hmm.
and an O-ring, and they would always get so loose. Like your Buck Rogers figures, after just a couple of weeks, wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
stand up. They were just like, Muppets. You just
Yeah.
hang around. So that didn't happen that much with the Star Wars guys. They had the 5 points, and that was fine. And then so the Buck Rogers didn't work out so well. And then the first line of G.I. Joe came out, and they had more articulation, very similar to the Buck Rogers. They had the knees,
Mm-hmm.
elbows, O-ring, head, and they had the ball joint type of shoulders.
Do you know offhand if the O-ring evolved from like the old school kind of Mego style, where a lot of the jointing was held in place? I guess that I don't know for sure, but my presumption is that sprang from puppets, where their limbs were held together with springs and like rubber extensions, rubber bands, and then you had that with Mego, and then my guess is maybe that transferred over to the O-ring idea, keeping a full figure together, but then also substituting some of the other joints with, again, like the knees and the elbows and whatnot.
Oh, and the Joes had the hips. Remember, they had that metal piece that would travel through the pelvis area that the legs would clip to. So, with the O-ring had that weird, like, so the O-ring would travel through the pelvis area, and the legs had an axis almost with a hook. So then you'd pull the rubber band through, hook it on, and then that would pull the abdomen and the pelvis and the legs together.
Yeah. With solid engineering. Now, do you like the O-ring? Because I know that it's a big thing within like the Joe community, and really kind of like the 4 3/4 inch collectors. That's a big thing. I know there have been Kickstarters that have started off with like Action Force and a lot of other that scale for action figures. There's a big contingency that loves the O-ring.
Right. I was a fan of it. I was a fan of the O-ring, and they're bringing it back. Like Reaction has done G.I. Joe with the O-ring now.
Yeah.
And I just got in my pile of loot. They did a 3 3/4 inch Ghostbusters box set with the O-ring style. So now I have the Ghostbusters to sit on my G.I. Joe headquarters, which is going to be amazing.
So hot take maybe from me. I hate the O-rings.
Right. You know why I like them? They rot. Like they rot, and the figure breaks apart. But it allows you to mix and match your figures. Like a figure would break, like a Joe figure would break. And once we figured out that you could screw the thing out the back, take it apart, and put another rubber band. Like we didn't have O-rings. Now I know that they're just what's the word I'm looking for? You could go to Home Depot and buy that size O-ring. You can have a whole bag full of them, but I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah.
They're just little gaskets. We would steal my mom's hair ties and loop it around there a couple of times, or take a rubber band and loop it around. So like one of our figures would break, the O-ring would rot or snap or whatever, and we could put the figure back together again. And
Yeah.
once we figured it out, we love the O-ring. So like if you've got a waist and it breaks,
Mhm.
you can't fix that, but the O-ring you can replace. So that's why I liked the O-ring.
See, I was never a fan. Like even though I had Joe's, and most of them. Oh no!
Oh, you
Someone was
got a toy avalanche.
someone was real offended by my stand. Oh, it's one of the biker mice. You jerks. Uh, I,
Man, you were really having it in for mice today.
they are, yeah, they are just, it's not working out. But I was, I just never liked yeah, like it just seemed flawed, I guess, because of how easily you could just snap it, like just in general play. Not from torture sessions or any like overextending anything. It would just snap, and I hated there was, yeah, unless you knew like a hardware store or yeah, like sell your mom's hair ties, whatever. There was no fixing it. But do you know who I feel like mastered that type of articulation, and I feel should almost be in charge of most 4 3/4 inch action figures? Jazzwares, their
Yeah.
Fortnite line. They
Fantastic. And I love that character. That character looks great.
Yeah, this was like a real quick and dirty, like lazy custom that I did. I just popped the head off and popped him on onto another body. But this,
Because he originally had the long coat.
Yeah,
cool. Kind of
no,
like this.
no, I was
a coat like that.
Oh yeah, he does. Yep. So I was fascinated by these when they first came out, because I really wanted to know, how does this happen? Because this, I feel like aside from Joy Toy, these, so you can, I do love that the Ninja Turtles, the Joy Toy Ninja Turtles, and the Fortnite figures can just hang out and they look great together. But the 3 3/4 inch Fortnite figures that Jazzwares did, I feel like it's perfection. The amount of articulation on it is amazing. You've got the shoulders, the elbows, the wrist. The ab crunch blew me away, blew my mind, and I didn't understand how they did it. So I had to pop them apart.
It's a ball joint, right?
Well, here's the thing. I had to pull them apart. So you have on the torso, there's a little like socket.
Yeah.
And then the midsection is its own separate piece, and that pops on top of it. And then you have the ball section for the torso, and that locks in. So this, to me,
I like that 3-chamber, like the original Jokes had that 3-chamber.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I feel like this solves so many problems. This will not break. This is one of the situations where the size of this figure is definitely a positive, in that there's not enough, like you don't have enough room to kind of mess around and break that. The motions that you're making with him is not going to snap that off. And the midsection being swappable, like this is just an insta custom. You can take anyone that has this kind of size midriff, you just mix them and match them, and you can make just an infinite number of Fortnite guys. And it's so good. It's so well done that I mean, I don't want to yuck anyone's yum. If you like the O-rings, and that's fine. But I feel like this is it. This is who I would want making any toy line this size. It's phenomenal. It's sturdy. The plastic is really like high end. But like this is the way that I kind of wish that things would go. So on the flip side of that, I'm an articulation snob, and that's not a secret to anybody. There are exceptions. One of them being, because I don't have any of my Battle Beasts nearby, Beast Saga figures. When these first came out, because Battle Beasts, I think, are really like the anti-Tom as far as articulation goes. 2 points of articulation. That's it. Right at the shoulders, they can go up and down. That's all you get. That's it, everybody. And I love them to death, and I'll fight anyone over them. But when they kind of like Takara did a slight soft relaunch of the line under Beast Saga, and I don't know, I really like it. The animation is fun, and they're just the play pattern of having the plunger to shoot the block out, and it's got like a whole dice game mixed into it. Not the same. And they've got the articulation at the shoulders. They tried to add the legs, but every single character is squatting to keep it under this size, and it's just not the same. Like I still like it. It's just not. It's not doing it for me.
Right. You know, I liked there was that progression of articulation, right? You could measure it as you go with the 3 3/4 inch figures because Joe's had the elbows, the shoulders, like we talked about, and then they even stepped that up after a
Hmm.
couple of series because they added the swivel arm
Hmm.
bicep thing,
Yeah.
right? The thing here that had the swivel arm, so they can hold their guns this way and that, and do the
Hmm.
Macarena and do whatever you wanted them to do.
Yeah.
And then that jump was also a jump in the detail of the sculpting. Everybody had their own head. The
Hmm.
original line had multiple, had like 3 heads for everybody. But they tried to duplicate that exact articulation with the O-ring,
Hmm.
with the cops figures.
Oh, okay.
And they didn't do as well, though that swivel arm bicep
Hmm.
would break all the
Yeah.
time. So many of the original cops figures, the bigger the bicep, the
Hmm.
seemingly easier it would break. And so I think you were right when you were like, that size with that particular style of articulation didn't allow for enough leverage to supply pressure to break or that. But that same mold, the same articulation that the swivel arm GI Joe had, didn't work on
Hmm.
a 6 inch scale with the cops. And they had the same exact, the metal bar with the O-ring with the
Hmm.
hook and the 3 segmented, the pelvis area, abdomen, legs,
Yeah.
the exact same model as the GI Joes, and it was much more fragile at that size.
I wonder if that has to do with the materials that they were trying out in the 80s.
Probably
Because
so.
everything was a big. It's. I love looking at the learning curve from say like the early 70s, where toys weren't meant to last. Like no one really thought.
Right. Yeah.
No one ever gave a second
Because
thought.
only little kids played with them.
Yeah, so it was like, okay, we'll make these sturdy enough so that a kid can crash, bang, boom, and if they break,
Unless it was Tonka. Unless
fine.
it was Tonka.
Oh yeah, I did love that was Tonka's thing. Like, do whatever. You're not
Yeah,
gonna
your
break. You're not
grandchildren will play with this truck. Yeah.
gonna break this truck. It'll outlive you. Decide who you want to give this to before you're
Mhm.
done for it. Because Tonka will be here when you're not.
Yep.
But it's interesting to look at how they designed based on I guess whatever material that was suitable at the time, and that material, a lot of that plastic was just not suitable for increased articulation, like just basic, again, like 5 points of articulation, just the up and down, like He-Man joints, where the arms are made of a slightly different plastic than the torso. So you got some rub from the articulation, but not a whole lot. But you had those lines where I want to say, as much as I love the sectors, they suffered from that, where it felt like the same kind of plastic that was used for that skeleton, which was really innovative. Uh,
Yeah.
like different types of articulation. It was a big departure from using rubber that would deteriorate, like the He-Man legs. So like after a certain amount of time, he was just
Yeah.
going to be
They
bow
were
legged
breaking off.
no
Yeah.
matter what. When sectors came along and they didn't have any rubber parts. I think the weapon straps were not quite vinyl, uh, but their jointing was solid to a certain extent. Like when you got them and they were brand new, everything was super super tight. But because the plastic was so similar, it just ground itself up. So
Yeah. That hip bone always
yeah,
broke. The hip bone.
yeah, that would usually snap, especially if it was pulled out, and then like the leg itself just became useless, or even like the joints. A lot of old sectors that you get now, or you buy them off of eBay, their joints are loose because they just ground themselves down
Yeah.
into a hollow. Um,
Yeah.
so I like that as we came along with articulation, people started to learn that you needed a different type of material to hang out, especially with ball sockets, because a lot of different toy lines actually did kind of try it.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that some of the GoBots have
Yep.
ball socket joints that a lot of toy lines weren't messing around with at the time.
Yeah.
Except that the ball part of that joint was metal and the receiving socket was plastic. So
Hmm.
nowadays they're just wobbly messes. But it was interesting
Yeah.
that the idea was there.
Yeah, it was. And it just now dawned on me another why I have such a fondness for like fewer articulated spots. My younger brother and I, every time we'd buy a figure when we were younger, we would test how powerful of a punch it could throw, right?
Mhm.
So it was always like, oh, this is a good punch arm because you're playing now. If the guy's
Yeah.
got a wrist articulation,
Mhm.
elbow, shoulder, and he throws a punch, it's just gonna crumble, right? But when you take like for instance, okay, so we'll talk about some of the figures we played with together when we were younger.
Mhm.
You had Strongheart from the Dungeons and Dragons, who didn't have an elbow joint, but he
Mhm.
had the ball joint on his shoulder, right?
Mhm.
Against Christar, who didn't have a ball joint on his shoulder. So Strongheart would throw the punch and his arm would go like this.
Uh-huh.
Whereas Christar was going to knock him out because this was a solid piece. Bam, he's gone. So we would actually play where, we would hit the figure like he was throwing the
Mhm.
punch. So
Yeah.
if that arm crumbled, this guy wasn't going to go. So we every time we got a new toy, it was like, okay, how good is his throwing? Like, is he going to have a good jab? And the ones with the more articulation didn't have a
Mhm.
good jab. They weren't going to be popping anybody.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. Um, I one of the other conversations that pops up all the time is articulation versus action feature or
Right.
versus action gimmick. And I know that for a while, again, especially in the 80s, you had a specific gimmick feature that was specific to whatever toy line, and the articulation was almost secondary. It was like, well, we need the toy to do this. Like every figure needs to be able to like reach back and pull their sword. So
Mhm.
the engineering is going to be for that arm to do whatever. And if you lose the sword, then you're just going to have a guy who's constantly objecting by banging on the
He
table.
could
He's
get a good back scratcher.
Yeah, that's the most he'll be able to do. But now that seems to have shifted where a lot of the action features, and it kind of took a while for this to phase out, although there
Mhm.
are still plenty of toys that have gimmicks. Uh, but now there was that phasing. Like most Marvel toys had some kind of gimmick.
Right.
Same thing with DC toys. You had some sort of like, whether it be like a sparking gimmick or the Spider-Man that had the part of his chest that came out that had the web strip. Uh,
Right.
you
It's
had that, but
idiotic.
yeah, like there was no way you were going to get an ab crunch in there because you needed that room for the engineering for the role.
Mhm.
What's your preference? Would you rather have some kind of neat toy gimmick, or do you want to be able to pose the guy in any pose you want?
See, that's a good question. So most gimmicks, accessories, like we talked about
Mm-hmm.
last week, go into the box, right? So gimmicks built into figures, aside from He-Man's punch, that
Mm-hmm.
power punch he had, that was
Mm-hmm.
cool. The battle armor wasn't bad, that was cool.
Yeah.
But for most parts, like that Conan figure I picked up last week for a couple
Mm-hmm.
of bucks, who had the pile of logs on his
Yeah.
arm, so he could fire what I assume were more logs,
Just for lot
right?
badly hewn stretches of wood.
Yeah. Uh, I could do without that, or like the dark
Mhm.
side that we speak on. That would be so cool from the Total Justice
Yeah.
line if it didn't have that giant, I can't reach the cereal on the shelf claw built in. Like if that came off, that's a near perfect figure,
Yeah.
except for that silly claw. So like that Spider-Man nonsense coming out of his chest, like what? What?
Mhm.
I could do without any of that.
Yeah.
But that being said, I I I'll give up posability, and this is going to sound oxymoronical, but I will give up posability for display ability.
Mhm.
And I mean that like, yeah, it's cool to have a superposable Spider-Man hanging from your shelf or your ceiling upside down with his feet together and doing all like that's cool.
Mhm.
But for the most part, most of my figures are on a shelf and being
Yeah.
displayed like the ones behind me. And I want them to stand up. And
Yes.
when you've got the double buckling knees and the weird hips and the toe articulation and that they can't. But when you look at this tick figure, who is just well sculpted,
Yeah.
amazing. I love him. He's got a good punch arm if I wanted to use it,
Mhm.
right? 5 points of articulation, sits on the shelf.
Mhm.
I love them. And if I'm a kid and I want to play with this toy, because we forget, like they're toys. And
Yeah. They're
I
not the
always,
seriousness some people.
I like a toy that feels like a toy. And this feels like a toy
Mhm.
when they can bend and sculpt and then be a contortionist, right? it doesn't feel like it's playable. It doesn't feel like a toy to me. They're
Yeah.
cool. They look great, but
Mhm.
and this I think is one of those things that separate me from other collectors is that I like it to feel and look like a toy.
Mhm. I I totally get what you mean about the how will this look on the shelf? Like, what is the will this get into a cool pose and then I can just leave it? Like, I do think that sometimes, and I am guilty of this too. Collectors will get a little too hung up on posing that could happen versus what we know you're going to do with it, and then you're going to
Right.
put it on the shelf and it's going to stay that way.
Right. If you're doing photographs and this, that, those cool
Yeah,
poses look awesome. But
um,
when it comes to like, and then what? Right.
the guy that worked on the Monstores Kickstarter. That was one of his
Yeah.
things where sculpting is phenomenal, and his big thing was that he didn't want to break up the mold, figuring out articulation points because sometimes, yeah,
Right.
depending on how well it's done, it will break up like a seamless bit of detail. But going back to he's saying you want things to look good. I think of the that McFarlane line that I kind of wish you would bring back. That Rav
Oh, I
line,
love it. Man, you've
like
just got everything in your hat today. You
hey,
were prepared to talk about
there's some
this.
rearranging going on, so I got a lot of stuff kind of scattered around me. But this
Wow.
Igor is honestly my favorite version of this figure.
Absolutely. I agree.
It does, and it's rotocast, but the material it's made out of is great. It's solid. It's only got it literally only has 5 points of articulation. But I and we started to see this in, I want to say, the 90s, maybe like late 80s and 90s, when sculpting started to take into account the amount of articulation a figure was going to have.
Right.
So the poses that they were able to get into was based on that articulation. So they're
And
like,
it's
well,
funny that you're holding a McFarlane toy
yeah,
because he kind of had that thing going on.
yeah. So you you take into account, well, this is probably what you're like. Cyborg's probably going to be flailing his fists like this. So the cut that we make should allow it to look good in just about any position. Honestly, if they, and we've talked about this before, if they brought back the Inhumanoids and they
Yes.
made Metlar Decompose and Tendril like this, like Rotocast, like I genuinely do not need 20 points of articulation in Metlar. It'd be cool if you could pull it off, but if he just maybe a couple more joints than this, but something solid, a really good sculpt on his face, and then you could still include the light gimmick and whatnot.
Right.
Uh,
The original Metlar had a, was it a ball joint arm? No,
yeah,
it wasn't. Was it
yeah,
a ball joint?
ball joint arm, cut joints for the hips,
Yeah.
and it was like they're well made, but I would like to see them try them again. And I in the early 2000s, I'm kind of glad that didn't happen because you probably would have wound up with. You remember that Hulk figure that came out for that terrible Ang Lee movie, but they had all the merchandise for it. But they
Yeah.
had a kind of a about this size, about the size of Cygor, that Rotocast Hulk. And
Yeah. It was awesome.
yeah, I liked the way it looked. Did not hold up well once you got it out of the packaging because
No, it did not.
it was trying to do too much. And I appreciate that they were trying to articulate it as much as they did, but it just wound up, maybe they used better material because it did feel almost maybe like 2 grades away from shampoo bottle plastic, and it just folded in
I'd
on
say
itself.
1.5 grades.
And then they didn't stop using it. Remember that was the base for like there were wrestling
Everything.
figures that had that same kind of body pose mapped onto
Yep.
it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it just was not a good plan, but I applaud their their trying.
You know when articulation really became annoying was when Toy Biz had the Legends lines.
Yeah,
It just and it was they were so thin, like
it,
Daredevil looked anorectic. It was
it
hard
was
and
very
angry.
it was very much a case of you get what you ask for, or
Right.
be careful what you wish for.
All I can think of is the line from Jurassic Park when he was like, "You were too busy figuring out whether you could, you shouldn't, you didn't think about whether you should."
Yeah, it was such a jump for them to go from like the standard 5 points for articulation for a majority of their line up to that point, and then going into shoulders, knees, hips, hands, feet, neck again. Uh,
Oh yeah,
torso.
they did double the they
Yeah,
did the ball joint
there was a
head.
lot of that, and it was all of it at once, and that's and again we've talked about this before, but it's fine for a character like Spider-Man or maybe even Daredevil, but not for Cyclops.
That
Or
was just a terrible sculpt, that Daredevil. But you're right.
it
Yeah.
was it's just not, and I guess you have to stumble that way before you kind of learn. Like the current Marvel Legends have definitely learned that lesson, but yeah, I remember it was such a it was just trying to do everything at
You
once.
may. I agree. You have to learn that lesson, but you don't have to release that learning curve, right?
Well, I guess to in their defense, it was the best that we had seen up to that point. Like we hadn't seen anything like that for a while. The best that we had was, I want to say, like manga Spawn, and at that point, McFarlane
Right.
shifted over to garbage plastic. So you're like,
Oh
maybe
yeah, it
articulation.
was garbage plastic. But the Daredevil that was in the Toy Biz Spider-Man animated series line, although he was a little bit pre-posed, he had this kind of
Yeah.
like sliding into like, into a musical number kind of thing. But he had a lot of more articulation than the other characters in that line.
Mhm.
They gave him the shoulder joints and the elbows and the knees and but um I'll take that figure over the initial giving from the Marvel Legends from Toy Biz
Yeah.
any day of the week. Any day of the week.
Yeah, I liken it to when like an artist learns about cross hatching, and you just do all the cross hatching, and we've all done it. Or when
Right.
or when you're learning Photoshop and you discover the lens flare, every
Right. You're
it's
like,
every
how does he have shadows on both sides of his body, right?
yeah, none of it makes any sense. Everyone's embarrassed by it. It's just something we did, and now we don't want to talk about it anymore because we don't do that anymore. But I I like that we I like that we've now arrived at the point where there's this vast library of articulation styles that we can look at and kind of cherry pick and say, I want this, and this from this style of articulation. I think it should have this type of articulation for these areas of the body, but not so much for this. Like again, it's happened to be nearby. I stumbled across
Oh, I love
my
those
light speaker
guys.
guy. Yeah. And he has, for
Those figures are phenomenal.
they're so good. And for a toy that is just meant to be part of a Toys to Life toy line, there like it's interesting looking at the decisions that were made. So like he's got the ratcheting
The
shoulders,
ratchet shoulders.
got the
I
head
love
joints.
ratchets.
The thighs are always interesting because there's so many different ways to do them, and there's so many ways to do them both right and wrong. And this kind of hits that.
Toy Biz did them wrong.
Yeah, they did them wrong, but
They couldn't have been any more wrong.
this guy handles it pretty well. We're like, it's even though like visually, if you're looking at it, it does break up the sculpt, but it holds up together. Like I've had this guy for a while, and he's been in all kinds of
You
like
could
cool
throw
fighting
those off a
poses.
building. Any one of those figures in that line, you can throw them off
It
a building.
holds up. Yeah, the plastic quality is really, really good. It's just a well-designed figure, but I love that.
They're heavy.
Yeah, they've got some heft to him. Like he's not gonna. If I drop him right now, I don't have to worry about him exploding when he hits the carpet.
Right. You could kill Colonel Mustard in the library with that figure.
And they'd never see it coming. And you're like, I was just playing Light Seekers, and he died. I don't know what happened. Understand? That's his problem. So this is also interesting because you start questioning. Quite you.
I thought that was my stomach.
You start questioning what figures need a lot of articulation, like the Jurassic Park line. He is a Regaliceratops. Does the Regaliceratops need like a fully swiveling front arm? I don't know.
Oh yeah, I can see he's got the shoulder joint.
Yeah,
He's got he's very regal.
does this, and this is a nice. I'm sorry, I keep activating him. I keep activating Regalisaurus. Sorry. I like that these like kind of hit that nice sweet spot where they still have a little like gimmick to them. He's got little, I don't know if he has lights, but he has sound to him. They've got I like the little DNA strip. That's just I don't know why I'm so amused by that. Because just
I haven't really looked at them. Do they all have the same DNA, or is it a different sticker for everyone?
It's different for every single one.
That's funny.
The only thing that would make this better would be if when you pulled that little strip out, a little voice would say Dino DNA.
Dino DNA.
That would be great. Or if it said the name of the dinosaur. I think that would that
That
would
would be
help with
fun.
just set it for kids. Uh, but but like these are kind of interesting, and this goes back to picking and choosing what you want. Like for a dinosaur, I don't need a ton of articulation for a dinosaur, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah,
Um,
because a dinosaur, when you're playing with it, is going to be ramming into jeeps,
yeah,
running through things,
that,
especially ones with horns like that, right? So
that's
you
all I
want
need
them
it
to
for.
be, a little bit more stout.
If it's a dinosaur, yeah, that's kind of all I need. But if it's a Saurozoa warrior, then I'm pretty happy with it having 20 some odd, 15 to 20 some odd points of articulation.
Yeah,
I think that's great. Oh, speaking of which, real quick, if you're enjoying the Big Bad Toy Store massive random
shameless plug.
clearance sale, shameless plug, because they're phenomenal. Go there and get you. They have the Brachius. They have Brachion in his normal colors for like $17, and I need to pop him open and see if that head joint is swappable.
I love those figures because they look so much like the Toxic Crusaders in color and style.
They do. They fit right in, and
Amazing.
I want them to make these like just stuff the waves, like fill the waves with repaints, just simple repaints, because the molds are cool enough where the strength is in that.
Right.
You can always find something to do with them.
You know which figures I really like, and I don't have many of them, ironically, in regard to like looking like a toy
Mhm.
and still having good articulation, but not too much articulation, are the Super 7 Ultimate lines.
Yes.
Because
They,
they still look like they are
mhm.
very well done,
Yeah.
sculpted, colored. But those Ninja Turtles, the GI Joe lines,
Mhm.
all of them look like the cartoons, therefore look like toys,
Yes.
are solidly built, not a million points of articulation. For the
Mhm.
most part, they stand up. Like
Mhm.
those to me, they've hit the home run.
Yes, I agree. They were really smart in the areas that they chose to add articulation to. They allow you, like you said, they allow you to do pretty much anything you want. Like any pose you can probably think of to put them in based on that character, those figures can do, which is really impressive. Because I'm sure there's a lot of like R&D that goes into that.
Right.
I'm sure there's a lot of decisions made. Do we articulate the hand? Do we add like an extra joint at the wrist? Uh, Once they scale back on accessories, they're they're perfect.
Yeah, they do have a lot.
So I think the last thing that I want to touch on is your
Are you
favorite.
praying?
Yeah, don't hate me when I ask you this question. I thought about it for a long time. What is your favorite, I guess, style of articulation? Like if you had, like going forward, if that's all you could get, what would you get?
I'm gonna go against the grain here. I really am, and I'm gonna get the thumbs down from a lot. But I like because I like the animated styles,
Mhm.
because I like toys that are toys, and I like playability. I am honestly gonna say I like those 5 points of articulation.
Mhm.
I do. They're solid figures. They stand. They're playable. They look like toys. You
Mhm.
don't have to worry about them breaking. You can store them well. Like, and I
Mhm.
don't care about the scale size, 3/4 inch, like those Marvel guys.
Yeah.
Those 3/4 inch Marvel superheroes that have the 5 points of articulation and they're
Mhm.
well sculpted and they're inexpensive and they're toys for kids. Phenomenal.
Mhm.
These long box heroes,
Mhm.
phenomenal. Um, I just if for the rest of my life I just had to have toys that are solidly built with 5 points for articulation, I'd be okay with that. Think about even cost. The cost is down on the 5 points for articulation figures, right? They're I'd be if we went back to collecting toys, like the toy companies did not market to collectors like
Mhm.
us, but just made toys like that, like those little Marvel guys, I would still buy them because
Mhm.
they're toys. I like toys that are toys. So
Yeah.
5 points of articulation, I'm standing by it.
It's funny you bring that up because I wouldn't. It makes sense that was why we got just the wide berth of characters that Toy Biz was able to
Yes.
crank out.
Yes.
because they only had to really be concerned with getting the sculpt and then same points of articulation on every single one, like at the head, arms, and hips. That's kind of all we need to do. So we can make what was his name? Killzone. We can do we can do
Right.
we can make the Imperial Guard and just crank them all out, because even though it's a new sculpt, we don't have to worry about butterfly joints. We don't have to worry about multiple neck joints. We don't have to worry about adding a crimp to the hands. We just get them out there, and that was also when I think it allowed them to focus more on gimmicks, and that's why we had those weird, like, wacky Wave Rider Spider-Man, because like the Spider-Man figure was almost like a non-issue. It was like, well, what kind of crazy thing can we come up with to stick him in to act?
And that was the thing. Like, once you have Spider-Man, you have Spider-Man, right? So, what about you?
Are
you gonna cheat?
I'm hanging on to my articulated snobbiness. If you take your average Marvel Legend, and you keep this level of articulation, and you do it well, that's what I want. I want, like, I don't care about pinless joints or anything like that. I want just a well put together figure. Honestly, I don't even need butterfly joints. Like, they're cool. You can get characters into some really cool, like, grr poses, but I don't even.
I'm not a fan of those. Like, for Wolverine and the Hulk, they work, but I don't need it on everybody.
I love the evolution of the thigh joint and the hip joint. I like that we have moved beyond that gigantic ball that used to sit in the socket or, like, sit next to the shoulder. We've learned to streamline both the sculpt to work with the articulation. So I like this setup where it's a joint, but then there's the cut right at the top of the calf. Double knees and elbows are great. Do I need them 100%? No. If it works well, then that's fine. I don't even really need the ankle joint.
Oh, ankle and toe joints, the bane of my existence.
It depends,
especially for Toy Biz.
Really depends on the figure. Like, there are some characters that look cool, like, to get them in the stance that you want. Like, I don't like pre-posed feet. I want them to be able to stand, like, just straight up and down if I want them to. The ankle joint is great if it does what I want it to do. But yeah, like, just your standard Hasbro Marvel Legend articulation makes me happy. I don't, if you go above and beyond, then that's fine. But a lot of articulation I kind of don't use. But if it's less than this, and it doesn't have to be, then I kind of feel like that's cheaping out. If your figure can benefit from, like, give it an extra joint, give it an ab crunch. There's so many toys that I've seen where I'm like, oh, that just had an ab crunch, that you could do it. Listen, if Jazzwares can do it, you can do it. Back into it.
I like the motivational speech. Because I personally cannot do an ab crunch. So
look, all I know is that as the years go by, my articulation goes down.
I have to sit down and tie my shoes. So
I know I gripe about articulation, but I don't have a whole lot of it left. So,
that's why you're living vicariously through your toys. I get it. Whereas I want my toys to mimic my flexibility.
That's why you love that giant swamp thing.
Yes.
All right. Well, this has been fun. We could stretch this out into a part 2. We won't, but there's so many different types of it, and we didn't even touch on Transformers that completely, unintended, transform their articulation scheme to work with their main gimmick of being a transformer.
The engineering behind those still boggles my mind. Even the crappy ones still boggle my mind.
It's amazing because they're with Transformers, unless you're getting into Action Masters and the RED line, which unfortunately was just a giant flop. Now I don't want to talk about it. You're designing a toy to not only transform from one thing to another, but then in its robot form, more and more, you want it to function as an action figure, and they've hit it out of the park a lot. And it blows my mind, and it's something to be commended for sure. But yeah, so on that note, we'll bring this to a close. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Two Guys Talking Toys. If you'd like to get a hold of us on VX Spot, now have us on Blue Sky, which is better. You can get a hold of us at Two Guys Talking Toys. That is number 2, no G after the Talkin on both sites, as well as our Gmail. Our Instagram is 2G Talking Toys. Like the video, subscribe, tell your friends, do a back bend, ask them about their butterfly joints. Take care, everybody.
And articulate how much you enjoy our show. We love Fightful.
You love Fightful. I am not a fan. Perhaps I need to rewatch that, but I don't foresee that happening ever again. So
we love everybody, Tom and I. We love everybody, except apparently Fightful the mouse, but that's a personal thing against Fightful.
I would say that I don't hate anybody.
Oh,
I feel like
I can't say that.
it's been tough. It's been real tough. But anyway.